Good afternoon from all around the world. Just again, feel free to introduce yourself in the chat stream, state where you're from, which organization or location you're coming from. But thank you so much for joining us. So this is the DHMOSH Public Health Conversation Series number 7. And today we're really gonna zone in on intermittent fasting and weight loss. And this was a topic that a lot of staff expressed interest about when we did our recent UN health survey. And just to give you some background, this public health conversation series is really targeted for all UN staff around the world. Peacekeepers can join in as well. And we have been focusing on just various topics that promote health and wellness among our staff. So without further ado, I'm just going to introduce to you Dr. Fung. So Dr. Jason Fung is a nephrologist, a researcher, and a New York Times best-selling author, currently practicing in Canada, Toronto. He's trained in LA and Toronto and currently specializes as a kidney specialist. But he's also written many books, a few of them known as the Obesity Code, the Complete Guide to Fasting, the Diabetes Code, and the Cancer Code. And he has introduced to the world intermittent fasting as a way to manage weight as well. He is co-founder of the Fasting Method, and that it's an organization that provides education tools and the community needed to successfully implement intermittent fasting. So with that, I'll just like to hand over to Dr. Fung. We will have a presentation for about 40 minutes, and then we'll move on to question and answers. And just feel free to put any questions you want in the chat, and we'll address that at the end. So over to you, Dr. Fung, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks so much, Esther. Let me just share my screen. You can hear me okay?
Yes, we're good.
Slideshow. Okay, thanks very much. So what I'm going to talk about today is sort of focused on weight loss, although weight loss has many dimensions. And, in terms of public health, it's really a very important aspect of metabolic disease, things like type 2 diabetes, which contribute to heart disease and stroke and so on. So it's much more than just a cosmetic issue. It's actually a huge health issue, which I deal with all the time as a kidney specialist, and the biggest cause of kidney disease in Canada is really type 2 diabetes. So the point about type 2 diabetes is that we treated it for many years with just, giving medications and so on. And we sort of ignored the fact that the disease itself quickly reversed once you lost weight. So everybody knew this, actually. If you lost weight, your diabetes would get better or go away. And the point is that if you don't have type 2 diabetes, you really can't get diabetic kidney disease. So that's how I became very interested in the problem of weight loss. So this is The Biggest Loser. It's an American reality show where people compete to lose the most weight. And very early on, they recognized, this is one of the contestants, that the television show never does a reunion. And they said, why? Well, because we're all fat again. And unfortunately, that's the big problem with weight loss, is that people can lose weight, but oftentimes they regain it back. So from a health standpoint, that's not really a big win. So if you look at the diet of The Biggest Loser, it's actually a fairly standard diet that you could see in the US News rankings, for example. It's ranked as one of the best diets for weight loss. And if you look at the specifics of how they tell people to lose weight, it's fairly standard advice. The same advice that I learned as a medical student. You reduce the number of calories that you eat, you try and increase your exercise, and this is what most people call like a eat less, move more strategy. And it seems very intuitive. If you eat less calories, if you increase exercise or increase the expenditure of calories, you are going to lose weight. But just because it seems obvious doesn't mean that it's actually true. So the question is, does this actually work? And we actually have lots and lots of data to fall back on. The biggest study was the Women's Health Initiative, which was published many years ago now, 2006. And what they did was they took almost 20,000 women and they basically told them to eat less fat and cut their calories, and they just followed them to see what would happen. So you can see that if you look at the total energy at the beginning, they're eating about 1788 calories. At follow-up, 1445. giving a caloric deficit of 361 calories per day. And what they did was they reduced the energy from fat, so it's a low-fat diet, and they increased the amount of carbohydrates, because the easiest way to reduce calories is to reduce fat, of course. And they increased their exercise. So these are METs per week, so that's metabolic equivalents. You see went from 10 to 11.4. So on average, they increased their exercise by about 10%. So that's pretty good, right? So 360 calories per day less, increased exercise. If you just calculate the total number of calories, most people would say these people should be losing about 30 pounds per year based on that caloric deficit. So 30 pounds per year sounds pretty good. But what actually happened is much less than that. So you can see that at year one, these people did lose weight, but it's about 2 kilograms. So instead of 30 pounds, 15 kilos, you're looking at 2 kilograms, 5 pounds. But by year 2, year 3, year 4, that difference goes away. By the end of the study, in fact, there was no difference between those people who were doing this eat less, move more diet and those people who just simply followed their own diet. There's barely less than a pound difference, less than a half a kilo difference. So what happened there? Like, this is the biggest randomized controlled trial we've ever done on studies like this. And really every single trial we've done on diet has shown the same thing. So sorry, if I'm getting some feedback here, if somebody could put it on mute.
Yes, can everyone make sure you mute yourself, please? Thank you.
So if you look at the average weight loss of subjects completing a minimum of 1 year of any sort of dietary trial, you can see that the weight loss of diet alone is sort of zero. So basically, and this goes out, and the longer it goes, the worse it is, right? So if you use very low energy diets, so these are things like 800 calorie a day diet, so extremely low, you see at 6 months, it gets very low. But even by 2 years, you're really losing almost all of the benefits. So by 3 years, you're sort of at 6 kilos, not bad, but you can see the trend is poor. And from a health standpoint, again, you're interested in long-term weight loss, not a 6-month blip of it. If you look at sort of real world data, you can see that this is a UK general practice database. If you look at the probability of success of achieving a normal weight by initial BMI, in sort of the most optimistic conditions of men or women, BMI 30 to 35, which is sort of classified as obese but not morbidly obese. This is the least of the obese categories. The probability using this sort of eat less, move more strategy, which again is the standard medical advice for the last 50 years and continues to be promoted by most authorities. The probability of success is 0.5% in women, 0.8%, right? So that means a failure rate of 99.5%. This is across everybody, right? So if you fail at losing weight, well, you're really using this strategy, you're really in the vast majority. So the thing is that, years ago when people looked at the actual success of this eat less, move more diet, virtually every academic knew it didn't work. So Jocelyn's Diabetes, this is a textbook. It's a classic sort of standard textbook of diabetes in 2005. It says, well, while the reduction of caloric intake, so eat less, is the cornerstone of any therapy for obesity, none of these approaches has any proven merit. That is, eat less, move more has never been proven to work. The Handbook of Obesity, even way back in 1998, again, it says dietary therapy is the cornerstone, reduction of energy intake. So they're focusing on caloric reduction is the basis of successful weight loss programs, yet the results of such diet are known to be poor and not long lasting. So it wasn't a surprise that nobody was losing weight. This diet, this eat less, move more diet, has been known to fail. And in fact, we know exactly why it doesn't work. So there's two major problems with standard sort of weight loss diets in terms of eating less and moving more, focusing purely on calories and exercise. One is a slowing metabolic rate. So when you look at this sort of energy balance equation, body fat equals calories in minus calories out. Okay, so this is the standard equation, and it's always true. However, it doesn't tell you what people think it tells you. People look at this and say, well, you need a caloric deficit, calories in minus calories out, to lose body fat. And this is that, so all a calorie is a calorie. So all calories, they say, are equal in terms of the fattening effect, which is not actually true. However, what you have to understand from this equation is that it's a balanced equation. It's an energy balance equation, which means there are three variables here. And if you simply change one of those variables, calories in, you can balance that equation by lowering body fat. So eat less, lose body fat, right? That's great. And people say this is, oh, the first law of thermodynamics. If you eat less, you will necessarily lose body fat. That's not actually true. It's completely false, actually, because there are three variables. You lower this variable, calories in, you could very well balance by losing body fat, which is great. Or you could lower calories out, right? Your metabolic rate goes down. You balance this equation. However, you do not lose any body fat, right? So it doesn't break any laws of thermodynamics. So anybody who says, well, it's the first law of thermodynamics, it's just physics, obviously does not understand physiology. Calories are from physics, not physiology. So the question is, which is true? If you eat less, do you lose body fat, which we actually know is not true, or does your metabolic rate go down? Because if you're eating 500 calories a day less, or 360 in terms of the women's health, if you're eating 300 calories a day less, but you're burning 300 calories a day less, well, then you're not going to lose body fat. That's just pure thermodynamics. So we've actually known that people slow their metabolic rate in response to caloric reduction. We've known it for more than 100 years. So what they did in 1917 in, Carnegie Institute was they took people and they reduced their calories by 30%. They reduced them to 1,400 to 2,100 calories a day. And what they found was that people got very cold. They said it was almost impossible to keep warm, even with an excessive amount of clothing. In other words, their body wasn't using the energy to generate body heat because it didn't have that energy. So it wasn't generating that much body heat, which means they were cold. And when they measured their metabolic rate, people dropped their metabolic rate by 30%, which almost exactly matches the 30% calorie reduction. So eating 30% less, burning 30% less, body fat stays the same. When they got out of it, of course, they got excess eating and they regained their weight almost immediately. This is a meta-analysis, a summary of 29 published studies from 1991, which shows the change in resting metabolic rate. So remember, this is the amount of calories that you are going to burn, okay, in response to calorie restriction. Reduce your calories, what happens to your metabolic rate? Well, in virtually every single study done to date, and this is 1991, so that's almost 30 years ago. So we knew this data 30 years ago. If you eat less, you will burn less, between, say, 10 and 20% less calories. That is what happens on every single scientific study we do. And what they said is that the first statement we can make with some certainty is that a decrease in energy expenditure is a universal response to energy restriction. So here's our strategy, right? This is what we tell people to do to lose weight, eat less, energy restriction. And yet, the scientific data tells us that in virtually everybody, this is a universal response. So you eat less, energy restriction, the response will be a decrease in energy expenditure, which is, of course, going to limit your body fat loss. We've shown this over and over again. This is a classic study from the New England Journal of Medicine, 1995. And what they did was they actually force-fed people to gain weight, and then they cut their calories to make them lose weight. And again, if you gain weight, your metabolic rate goes up. So if people gain weight, they're burning about 500 calories a day more. The body's trying to burn that energy off. As they go back to their initial weight, their energy expenditure goes down. And then as they lose weight, their energy expenditure goes to negative, so negative 300-ish calories per day. So that's going to limit, of course, your weight loss. So going back to the Biggest Loser, that's the American game show, we see exactly the same phenomenon. So as people lose weight, there's week 6, week 30, this is the eat less, move more. What happens is that people lose a good amount of weight, like in this case, 60 kilos, so a lot. And most of it is body fat, so it's really good. 329 to 202 pounds, body fat goes down to 49%. However, what happens to the metabolic rate is that it drops very, very severely. So this fellow, for example, went from burning 3,500 calories all the way down to like 1,800 calories. So that's a lot. Even if this person decides that he's going to eat or she's going to eat 2,000 calories a day, right? That's a lot less than they used to eat. That's like 1,500 calories a day less. They're still going to regain that weight because their metabolic rate has slowed so severely. And you see this over time. So this is their resting metabolic rate, which is, you know, your heart, your brain, your lungs, your kidney. And this is non-resting, which is exercise, right? So during this study, they exercise a lot. So they make up for their falling metabolic rate by increasing exercise. And then as the exercise drops, you can see the total metabolic rate goes down, but the metabolism, the basal metabolism has continued the same drop. And you know, the hope is always that your energy expenditure, your metabolic rate is going to go back up over time. It actually doesn't. It just keeps staying down and it's maintained over years. So again, the point is that calories are food energy, okay? And it's very different from the hormones, which are the instructions to your body to what to do with those calories. You know, classic sort of eat less, move more focuses purely on the calories and doesn't worry about what's happening with the hormones. You have to understand that there's, again, it's 3 components. You have the food that you eat, so the energy going in, which is like coal for a power plant, for example. When you eat, this is energy. Those are calories, okay? So that's the food energy. But what do you do with it? Do you store it or do you burn it? And for that, you need to fix the hormones because the energy comes in, insulin goes up, okay? That's the hormone that tells your body energy is coming in. I'm going to burn some, I'm going to store some. But what you cannot do is take energy from your stores and burn it, right? Because your body says, hey, energy is coming in. I want to store it, I want to burn it. But I'm not going to take energy stores, which is body fat, right? And burn it. So you cannot burn body fat while your insulin levels are high because that's just physiology. That's just the hormones. It's only when you drop your insulin, when your body says, oh, I'm not going to eat, that the energy can come out from your fat stores. So what's important here is not just the calories that are coming in, but what's happening to your hormones. Are you allowing your body to lower its insulin, which is not eating, right? If you're eating, insulin is going to go up. It's only when you're not eating that insulin is going to drop, which is going to allow you to take stored energy out. So what we hope happens is this: as you decrease your energy in, your fat stores go down, your basal metabolic rate stays the same. But what actually happens is that as you drop your energy in, your energy out, your metabolic rate goes down and your fat stores stay the same. And that's because of the high insulin. The second problem is hunger. And what you see is that this is a study from New England Journal of Medicine. And what they did was they followed people over a year and they looked at people who lost weight. And they measured their hunger. They measured their ghrelin as well, which is a hunger hormone. And what they find is that compared to baseline, this is baseline in the black, week 10, week 62, their hunger levels and their ghrelin levels, which is another hormone, are actually significantly higher at all time points. So before they eat and even as they're eating to when they're not eating. So this is the ghrelin, which is the hunger hormone. You see much, much higher. So as people lose weight, they're actually going to be hungrier. Okay, and this is not just some voodoo. It's not like, oh, because they haven't eaten, they're psychologically more likely to eat. No, it's because their hormones, their ghrelin, is higher which is making them hungrier. Same thing with peptide YY, which is a satiety hormone. So if this is low, it means you're hungry. Satiety is fullness, so the higher it is, the more full you are. And again, same thing. As people lose weight, that's that they are hungrier. It's not just psychological. It's not low willpower. These people are physiologically more hungry than you are. So the whole problem is those two. If you lose weight and you don't fix the hormones that have these two problems, you get as you lose weight, you're going to slow your metabolic rate. You're going to increase your hunger, which is, of course, going to lead to regaining that weight. That's why it happens in 99.5% of people. And if you don't address these two physiological issues, that is, it's not some, this happens to this person because they have low willpower. It's because their hormones are completely out of whack. This is what happens. You eat less calories, you lose weight, your body adapts by making you more hungry and burning less calories, which is going to make you regain that weight, right? So you double down and you eat even fewer calories. Then you lose more weight, your body continues to lower, you're cold, you're tired, you're hungry, but you're regaining weight. And it's not because of low willpower, it's because this is what we've told our body to do using this simple strategy of focusing purely on the calories. So the ultimate proof, of course, is in all of us, right? Every study we've done and all the anecdotal data from people, everybody knows how hard it is to lose weight. Is it because it's really hard to lose weight, or the strategy that we've used is simply not that effective? So why fasting? So, what is fasting really? Fasting is simply a period of time that you don't eat. That's it. There's nothing more complicated than that. It's a natural sort of balance between feeding, right? Feeding, your insulin is going to go up. You're going to store calories, burn calories. And there's a period where your insulin should go down. And as you go down, no more food is coming in. You're going to take the body fat and you're going to burn it for energy. And of course, that's natural. I mean, that's where the English word breakfast comes in, your meal that breaks your fast. That's because we acknowledge in our language that fasting is simply part of the natural cycle, feeding and fasting. You can't feed all the time and you can't fast all the time. The problem is that people thought we should eat sort of 6 to 10 small meals a day, which is going to keep your insulin levels high and never allow you to get into the state where you're burning your stores, right? If you're continually putting fuel in, if you're continually eating, insulin's going to stay high. You're not going to be able to burn your fat. Your grandmother might have said, oh, you need time to digest the food that you eat. Same idea. You need to balance. Okay. And what fasting is simply a transition from eating your carbohydrates, because a lot of us eat sort of a carbohydrate based diet, to fat oxidation, right? That's really all that fasting is. So how does this address those two major problems of basal metabolic rate? Well, everybody thinks is that if you don't eat, your body is going to burn less energy. That's not actually true because, again, if you look at the studies of what happens when people don't eat, this is a study where they've gone from day one of fasting and they've measured how many calories are you burning. And it's really after 4 days of not eating, it's gone up from about 4 to 4.4. It's increased its metabolic rate. You are burning about 10% more calories after not having eaten for 4 days. And why is that? Well, it's because, again, it's the hormones. When we don't eat, the hormone insulin falls, but other hormones go up. And these are called the counter-regulatory hormones. And those include things like norepinephrine and increased sympathetic tone. So the sympathetic nervous system is our fight or flight response. It's noradrenaline. You're actually pumping your body full of noradrenaline because your body is actually taking its stores of energy. So it's not decreasing the amount of energy it's burning, it's increasing the amount of energy it's burning, but it's switching fuel sources from the food that you eat to the body fat that you've stored away. This is the same thing. It shows that if you look at a 72-hour fast and what happens to human adipose tissue, which is fat, what you see is that norepinephrine goes up and up and up, right? So insulin is going down, right? So this is before the fast, day 1, day 4. So 3 days of not eating. Your insulin goes down, which is what it's supposed to do. your resting energy expenditure, your body weight goes down, so it's down 2 kilos. Your resting energy expenditure, which is the amount of calories you're burning, went up from 1684 to 1729. So remember, when you do the eat less, move more, your energy expenditure continually going down. When you're fasting, it goes up in response to the hormones because you've allowed the insulin to fall and the norepinephrine, the adrenaline, to go up. And again, this is a study on a comparison between caloric restriction, which is CR, and alternate daily fasting. And again, if you look at the calories, right? So at alternate daily fasting, it was down by about 29 calories, but the p-value here is not significant, which means that you can't tell that this is a real effect. Whereas the caloric restriction, you've gone down by 76, which is a significant result, a statistically significant result. So to understand it, you just have to look at this. So this is the calorie restricted model. You're focusing purely on calories. You're eating all the time. You're eating a very low fat diet, which is high in insulin. So insulin is high all the time. Remember, when insulin is high, you cannot access your fat stores. So let's start with 2,000 calories going in, 2,000 calories coming out. So you're not gaining weight, you're not losing weight, right? You're burning what you take. You're eating breakfast, snack, lunch, snack, dinner, snack, right? This is eating 5-6 times a day. Insulin is up. Insulin is up. You can't get fat stores. Now you want to lose weight. So people say, just cut 500 calories a day. That's all you need to do, right? Well, what happens is that your insulin is high because you're eating fewer calories, but you're still eating all the time. Fat can't supply the extra 500 calories you need. So therefore, what happens is that your metabolic rate must go down. That's the only way to balance this equation. There's 3 variables. There is no caloric deficit. There's never a caloric deficit. It's 3 variables that must balance: energy in, energy out, and fat stores, right? This is what happens. So we know in real life, this is what happened. We know in every scientific study we've done, this is what happens. And this is why. If you take the same number of calories, but allow your insulin to fall with periodic fasting, what happens here? Again, 2,000 calories in, 2,000 calories out, and you've got fat stores. And remember, your fat stores are like hundreds of thousands of calories, right? It's not 2,000, it's many, many days that you can eat. Well, now you say, okay, well, I'm going to reduce my calories to 1,500 calories per day by skipping these snacks, skipping these meals, right? Now what happens? Well, your insulin falls, so the energy simply comes from your fat stores. Now you got 1,500 here, 500 coming here, 2,000. Your metabolic rate does not have to go down. In fact, if it wanted to, it could go up and take a little extra from the fat stores because the hormones are telling it to. And that's how you're going to lose body fat. It's not the hormone, it's not the calories. The calories in both situations are exactly the same. It's the hormones that you have to adjust. The second problem is hunger. Everybody assumes that if you don't eat for a period of time, you're going to be so hungry, you're going to have to stuff your face with donuts, and that's really bad. Well, that's not actually what happens. So if you look at fasting and ghrelin, so again, remember, ghrelin is the hunger hormone. Higher it is, the more hungry you are. What happens when you skip lunch, dinner, and breakfast? So first of all, you see that there's 3 spikes at breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And that clearly shows that hunger is, a habit. So if you're used to eating breakfast, you're going to be hungry at breakfast because that's why it goes up. What happens when you don't eat, right? So this is 24-hour fast. They measured ghrelin. At lunch, you skip your lunch. You're busy. At 12 o'clock, you're hungry. But you're busy, right? You're doing work, you're in a meeting, you can't eat. Well, by 4 o'clock, your ghrelin has actually fallen right back down to baseline, which means that your hunger level at 4 o'clock is actually the same whether you ate lunch or didn't eat lunch. Same for dinner. You're hungry at 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock. By 10 o'clock, when you're ready to go to bed, your ghrelin levels have actually fallen back to baseline. Why? Because your body simply took those calories out of its fat stores. So if you're eating 1,000 calories at dinner and one day you decide you skip dinner, you're too busy, you skip dinner, Your body takes 1,000 calories from your body fat, which has, say, 200,000 calories of body fat. Now you have 199,000 calories of body fat. Takes those 1,000 calories, uses it for energy. You're not hungry. And that's all that happens. There's nothing complicated to it, but you have to let your insulin levels fall. If you look over multiple days of fasting, what's very interesting is that it goes up, it goes down, right? But over time, your body simply gets used to it. Your ghrelin levels, your hunger levels are actually continuing to fall over 3, 4, 5 days. And that's the secret to how people do things like hunger strikes and so on, where they go weeks without eating, because they're actually not hungry. They're actually just feeding themselves on their body fat. And men have it, and women have an even more pronounced drop because they tend to have much higher levels of ghrelin, just on average. If you look at cravings, this is another thing in terms of food addiction. A lot of people get addicted to certain foods, whether it's sweets or carbohydrates or fast foods or whatever. And what you see is that if you go to a low calorie diet, that is, if you simply reduce the sweets by a little bit, your cravings actually don't go down much. So if you're addicted to sweets, candies and stuff, and you simply cut it down, those cravings are very strong. But if you cut it to zero, those cravings go way down, which is the same as itching, right? If you're itchy, you need to stop scratching. If you simply say, oh, I'm just going to scratch like 50% less, when you scratch, you're going to get more itchy. Same thing with cravings. If you feed those cravings, it's just going to stay up there. Doesn't change. But if you cut it out completely, they completely go away. It's the same with food. So you see that what's interesting actually is that the cravings go down, but after you refeed, those cravings actually don't go back up to baseline. So even after 6 weeks, where they took these general cravings, right, really went way down, as you sort of, it's simply an adjustment period. It's not forever. It doesn't go back up right away. You get this period where you're still going to reduce your craving. And that, again, has implications in terms of hunger, because if you're no longer craving these foods, then you're going to do better. So again, if you look at that study I mentioned earlier, where they're looking at calorie restriction. So again, this is standard medical advice, has been our standard advice for 50 years. And you look at ghrelin. So how hungry are these people? You see that ghrelin has increased by 71, which is a p-value of 0.04, which is statistically significant, and much higher. So these people are hungry. If you simply reduce your calories, you are going to get hungrier. If you do alternate daily fasting, it only goes up by 16.6, which is not statistically significant. So, the hunger is a really important thing, because how much do you eat? Well, it all really depends on how hungry you are, right? If you're more hungry, you're going to eat. And if you're going to eat, calorie restricted diet, you're going to still eat, but just a little bit less. You're going to get more hungry, and your metabolic rate is going to go down. And we know this, of course, right? So if you think about what an appetizer is, an appetizer is a small piece of food. So if you're hungry and you eat an appetizer, it makes you more hungry, right? It doesn't make you less hungry. So if you are simply using this calorie restricted model, right, you're going to make yourself more hungry and then stop eating. And do this all the time. Do this 6 times a day. You're going to eat a little bit of food that will make you more hungry. And then as opposed to fasting, which is that you're just going to choose a period of time where you're not eating and let your hunger go down. So everybody thinks it's about, oh, is it hormones or is it calories, right? And we've all been told sort of that's all about calories, right? Body fat equals calories in, calories out. And we say, well, this is your diet, this is your exercise, and it's all within your control. That's why we say, well, if you're overweight, if you're obese, it's your fault, because you can control your diet, you can control your exercise. And that's very, very superficial thinking, because really, if you think about it, why are you eating more, right? It's all about hunger. And it's all about your metabolic rate, not your exercise. And these are not within your conscious control. That is, you can control your diet, but you can't decide to be less hungry. You can't decide to have a higher metabolic rate. So therefore, it's really all about the hormones. It's not about the conscious control. It's not simply about, oh, eat less, move more, because you're looking at the most superficial level of thinking. When you start to go deeper, you start to understand that it's really about controlling the hunger, not controlling the diet. This is the the proximate cause. This is the ultimate cause, or the root cause. So if you're excessively hungry, you need to deal with that excessive hunger, not simply say, well, just don't eat. I mean, that's as it's as bizarrely stupid as saying to an alcoholic, hey, it's all about alcohol in minus alcohol out. Therefore, the solution is easy. You just need to drink less alcohol. Here, I've solved alcoholism. Just the same as people say, hey, it's all about calories in, calories out. Just eat less. I've solved obesity. You haven't solved anything because you haven't thought about the problem deep enough, right? In terms of alcoholism, it is alcohol in, mass alcohol out. That is always true. There's never any truth to it. But what is the deeper reason? Maybe these people are depressed. Maybe they have, psychological trauma. So we don't treat those alcoholics by saying, hey, it's your own fault. It's alcohol in minus alcohol out. You have no willpower. We treat them with therapy. And we try and understand, why are you drinking so much? Why are you on this self-destructive cycle? Yet we don't do that for all these people who are overweight, which is grossly unfair, because we're saying to them, and this is all the sort of gym crowd, the bro science, the conscious control, oh, just eat less, move more. No, you have to understand why people are eating less, and you have to understand the metabolic rate. So in terms of long-term weight loss, you have the chronic calorie restriction, hunger increases, metabolism decrease. We know this in every single study of the last 50 years, and people regain their weight. As opposed to intermittent fasting, where you're doing the opposite, right? Hunger is going to decrease, your metabolic rate is going to stay stable or increase, and that is going to help you maintain your weight loss. So why don't people fast? Well, there's a lot of myths around it. One is, for example, that you're going to burn muscle. And the truth is that your body's not that stupid, right? Your body stores energy in the form of body fat and glucose. When you don't eat, your body's going to use body fat and glucose. That's it. In order for you to burn muscle, you'd have to believe that our body is simply so stupid as to store body fat in case we don't eat, and then as soon as we don't eat, burn muscle. Why would you do that? It's sort of like storing firewood for the winter. As soon as it gets cold, you chop up your sofa and throw it in the fire. Why would you do that? We didn't come to be the dominant species of this planet by being so stupid. And this is the study, again, showing the same thing. If you look at alternate daily fasting, what you can see is that fat mass goes down, but the fat-free mass is maintained. And again, it's because as insulin goes down, growth hormone goes up, which is going to maintain lean body mass. Same thing here. If you look at the lean mass calorie restriction, gives you a lean mass loss of 0.5%, a gain of 0.5% because you're losing body fat. Alternate daily fasting actually increases lean mass by like 2.2, which is like 4 times better preservation of lean mass, right? So much, much better. The fifth, people say, well, it's great, but you can't do it. But there are literally millions of people around the world. So if you look at the Buddhists, if you look at the Muslims, if you look at the Jewish people, if you look at Christians, like there's fasting all over the place. So literally millions of people all around the world have lots of different fasting traditions. So the idea that you can't do it is simply not true. It's simply that people have told you not to do it. In fact, I tell people to do it all the time. So if people are going for surgery, you can't eat. Colonoscopy, can't eat. After surgery, can't eat. All kinds of reasons. If you go for fasting blood work, you have to fast. So if I'm telling people every single day to fast, why can't people do it in order to lose body weight or reverse type 2 diabetes? And if you actually, this is a study they showed of female physicians, and what they found was that if you ask doctors, how do you lose weight? This is female physicians, and on average, their body mass index about 25, so not bad. They lost 13.2 pounds on average. So physicians who lost weight, what did they use? Well, for themselves, they overwhelmingly chose intermittent fasting, ketogenic diets, low carbohydrate diets, and prolonged fasting. 75% did it for themselves to lose, maintain weight. Ketogenic diets too. For patients though, it's only 35, 27%. So we're advising our patients to do other strategies, but for ourselves, we're using fasting. Why? Because the doctors know it works. If you don't eat, you're going to lose weight. And there's no reason why you can't, why you need to eat all the time. There's no physiologic reason why you need to stuff that muffin in your mouth if you're not hungry. And we've all done it. All the doctors have done it. We've all been so busy that we haven't eaten for, 16, 20, 24 hours. We've all done it. We've done it multiple times because sometimes in the emergency you're slammed. So we know that it doesn't do any harm. We prescribe it for our patients and we do it for ourselves too. This is just a graph to show some people say females can't do it. And really, if you look at the average weight loss males versus females, this is from a study from 1968. In fact, there's no difference. So there's no reason why you can't do fasting. It's just a part of natural, natural physiology. You store calories. If you don't eat, you're going to use the stored calories, which is body fat. But there's a lot of benefits to that because remember that this is, a very simple thing. You don't have to explain it to anybody. Don't eat, right? You want to try a paleo diet. Well, is it this? Is it that? Is it paleo? Is it not paleo? Is it fast? This is not that fasting. Just don't eat. It's free. So in those places where there's not money and people have overweight, so like lots of places in the United States, for example, lots of poverty in conjunction with obesity, well, you can't do a strategy that's going to cost a lot of money like bariatric surgery. But this is not that. This is completely free. In fact, it's better than free because you're not spending money on food. It's convenient. You don't have to shop, you don't have to cook, you don't have to clean up, and you don't have to eat. So you're saving a lot of time. It's flexible. That is, if it's Christmas time and you want to celebrate, you don't have to fast. And you can do more the next week if you want to lose weight. And really, you can add it to any diet. So fasting doesn't dictate what diet you eat. If you don't eat meat or wheat or nuts, you don't have time, you don't have money, you're traveling, you can add it to any diet. So it really is sort of not part of the diet. Okay, the diet is the foods that you choose to eat. Okay, and we focus so sort of myopically on the diet. Is it keto? Is it paleo? Is it vegetarian? Is it this? Is it that? That we've completely forgotten there's two parts to your eating day. There's what you eat, and there's the period of time that you don't eat, where you're going to use those calories, and both are very important. So you choose what diet you want, and that's a whole different discussion, but you want to eat whatever diet you eat, you can still add that fasting piece. So if you're vegetarian because of religious reasons or whatever, you can still be a vegetarian and fast. If you eat Mediterranean, you can still do Mediterranean and fast. It's a lot better. So the other thing, of course, it gives you unlimited power, which is really important because it's something that virtually
Get off, get off. He's biting.
and so it virtually always works.
Get off.
Remember
Sorry,
that
can everyone mute themselves? Thank you. Yeah.
thanks. You really can't go lower than 0, right? So when you're fasting, you're eating 0 calories. No matter what diet you follow, you cannot go lower than 0. So really, this is the most effective intervention for weight loss that exists. There cannot be anything more powerful than that practically. So, and you can do it as long as you want. That is, if you decide you want to do a Mediterranean diet or a DASH diet for weight loss, that's great. But if you don't lose weight, you can't get more DASH than DASH, and you can't get more vegetarian than vegetarian. But you can continue to fast. You can, instead of 16 hours, you can do 20 hours. You can do 24 hours. You could do a week if you wanted to, right? You can always go up. So that's a huge advantage because if you have severe disease, like I deal with, a lot of severe obesity, a lot of type 2 diabetes, you can ramp it up and get it powerful enough to actually lose the weight to reverse that type 2 diabetes and really help them in the future. You can actually make them much healthier, but it's always under your control, right? If you do bariatric surgery, great, it works. We know, we have studies, it works. You cannot reverse that surgery that you've done, you cut out your stomach is like that. You get complications, you still can't reverse it. Fasting is never that. Fasting is always under your control. And because of all of those advantages, we really have to start thinking about it as a tool. It's not something you have to use. It's just a tool in your toolbox, but it's a very powerful tool that has been used for thousands of years. That is, people say, oh, it's just some fad diet, right? No, it's been used at least since ancient Greece, right? So you're talking in thousands of years. If there was a problem with fasting, we probably would have found out about it 2,000 years ago. Not like, oh, the ancient Greeks fasted and it was really good for them, and now it's bad for us in 2022. No, it doesn't make sense that way. And it's actually much more important now than it ever was, because again, if you look at the diseases that we face, back then they faced diseases of, infections and so on. And now some of the most important problems you face now are related to obesity, type 2 diabetes, and metabolic disease. So that's just one sort of quick snapshot on fasting, why it works, why it doesn't work. And, I'm happy to take your questions.
Great. Thank you so much, Dr. Fung. This was really, really helpful and insightful. And I just also love to see all the studies. We know anecdotally that a lot of, calories reducing may not work, but, just seeing it like from the studies is really, really helpful. I just have some kind of practical questions. So obviously, everyone understands fasting is basically not eating for a period of time. I just want to know, what would you say is the optimal kind of period of time to fast? Is there a kind of an optimal peak time versus fasting for too long? Or not really?
Yeah, there's so in terms of, there's two sort of parts to that. One is the time of day. So what if you skip breakfast versus skipping dinner, for example? That's a great question because it's actually quite important. The most effective way to fast is actually to cut out your late night eating. So late night eating, skipping dinner is actually much more effective than skipping breakfast. When you eat breakfast, you're going to use it throughout the day. And then when you're sleeping, you're going to use your body fat store. So it's much more effective if you're going to, do say a 16-hour fast or a 24-hour fast. If you're eating one meal a day, you're going to lose fat more effectively if you skip dinner versus skipping breakfast. However, you have to balance that with how easy it is for you to do, because remember, these are all habits. And for most of the people in North America, we follow this sort of schedule where we go to work, and then we have dinner with our family. So it's really a lot harder from a social standpoint to skip dinner, because if you're going to miss dinner with your family and friends every single day, you're not going to be very happy. So it's a balance there. So in terms of the optimal schedule, there's a bit of a disconnect between, it's better to skip dinner than to skip breakfast. The other thing is how long you should fast for. And for that, there's actually no optimal duration. So if you look at sort of the standard eating patterns of Americans in the 1970s, on average, it was sort of you eat breakfast at 8 a.m. and eat dinner at 6 p.m. and you don't eat after dinner. So you had actually 6 p.m. to 8 a.m., which is a 14-hour period of fasting. So 14 hours is what most sort of North Americans did every single day without even thinking about it. Okay, so if you want to lose weight now, if you look at the average today in North America, it's actually the eating duration is about 14 hours and 45 minutes, which means if you started at 8 a.m., you wouldn't stop eating until 10:45 p.m. every single day on average. So you're basically eating the entire day. And, you see this reflected in norms, like people will eat in the car, they'll eat in front of the TV, they'll eat at their computer, they'll eat everywhere. Whereas before, it was not acceptable to eat in your car and eat, in front of the TV, eat at work. Like if you went to work in the 70s and you ate at your desk, people say, what are you doing? Like, you don't eat at your desk, you do work at your desk. You want to eat, you go have your lunch. So that, you know, what period of time you should use. So 14 hours is sort of, but a lot of people should be doing every single day. And that's how they maintain their weight without really even thinking about it. Remember, they're eating white bread and jam and all kinds of processed foods too, but they're not eating all the time. So if you want to lose weight, you can go up to 16 hours, 24 hours. And so those are the two most popular regimens, because the 16-hour fast actually fits into your work day very easily. So if you skip breakfast, generally nobody cares, right? If you then go to lunch and dinner and don't eat after dinner, well, then you can fit that in almost every day without even thinking about it. If you go to a 24-hour, the next most popular is sort of a 24-hour schedule, which is a 1 meal a day sort of schedule. Again, you skip breakfast, nobody cares. You skip lunch, a lot of people don't care anymore. And you have dinner once a day. Not every day, maybe 3 times a week, 4 times a week. The longer it is, the less times you generally have to do it. So those are the two most popular schedules, but you can do any schedule you want. You can do 20 hours, you can do 2 days, you can do 3 days, you can do 4 days. Remember, the longer ones tend to shift your metabolism into fat burning mode, because that's all that's available to you. And the other thing is hunger tends to drift down as you go into the longer fast. So having done a few of them myself, I'll tell you that the hunger, the physical hunger, actually is quite remarkable. It goes down quite a bit actually. But the psychological hunger is what you have to watch, which is, you know, when you're constantly seeing food around you, that is, you're walking, oh, there's McDonald's, oh, there's donuts. It's like, it's the, hey, that would be really tasty. Not the actual physical hunger. The physical hunger actually, in a lot of cases, and we hear this all the time, is actually very low. But when you're constantly tempted to, oh, you watch TV, oh, there's an ad for food, right? It's that's the real problem. So there's no best schedule. It's really whatever works best for you, and it's always a balance between what is easy and what is best. I mean, what is best is eating early and fasting late, but the opposite is true for most people.
And a really popular question that's coming up, kind of what actually can we take during fasting? I mean, like, for example, can we take tea and coffee? I like to drink like lemon water. Is that breaking it fast already?
That's a great question. And again, for the water is fine, teas are fine, green tea is very good. So those have no calories, and they don't increase insulin, so they're not going to affect the fast. Remember, the point
And a
of fast,
black coffee is okay.
black coffee is okay as well. Some people actually quite like those because black coffee and green tea have some stuff. So the caffeine increases your metabolic rate. And the other thing is that they have certain compounds that may actually inhibit lipolysis as well. So inhibit lipogenesis. So coffee, tea, water, those are fine. And those are all sort of classic sort of fast. Then you have sort of things that do have calories. So coffee with cream, for example. You do want to avoid sugar and stuff, but coffee with cream, sometimes coffee with butter, sometimes bone broth, right? Those are actual foods because they have calories in them. And people always worry about that because it's like, oh, I broke my fast. But remember, the point of fasting is to get your insulin down. As you get your insulin down, your body's going to shift over and burn stored calories. So yes, if your insulin's going down, 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 and then you take a little bit of coffee with cream, it's going to blip up. But it's so small that in 15 minutes, it's going to start going down again. So it's not like if you do a 16-hour fast, you have a coffee with cream, then it's not like, oh, wow, everything's back to zero, right? It's like you're going to have a 15-minute break, and then it's going to keep going down. If you have a full meal, of course, then that completely shifts. Your insulin goes way back up. You're going to start storing calories, right? But the small amount that you get in the coffee with cream, bone broth, it's not going to be major. You're going to have a little sort of hold it and then keep going down. So those are completely fine.
And you mentioned sugar is like a no-no when you're fasting.
Yeah.
Like someone's asking about coffee with honey. Is that really gonna like break things?
Again, if you put a small amount, it's not going to really. I generally ask people to avoid sugar and sweeteners and stuff anyway, because again, they tend to stimulate the appetite. Again, you're trying to make it easy on yourself by reducing appetite. And I see it, some people say cinnamon. Cinnamon's actually excellent because it doesn't necessarily stimulate it. It may actually suppress it a little. But the point is that if you take something sweet, it's basically an appetizer. So if you're going to make yourself start thinking about food, you're going to salivate, you're going to increase your hunger, and therefore you're going to make that fasting a lot harder. The calories itself is not going to be a major issue, and that's the same with the sweeteners. There's a reason why sweeteners are not that effective in terms of weight loss overall. So it sounds like a great idea, right? If you have an artificial non-caloric sweetener, whether it's aspartame or monk fruit or stevia, it sounds like a great idea, right? Replace the sugar, which has, say, 100 calories, with something with 0 calories. Well, in reality, it doesn't work. I mean, how many people have ever said to you, well, I just got off my diet soda, lost 50 pounds? Like 0 people have said that to me, right? In fact, it's usually the opposite. It's people who say, oh, I got off the diet sodas. I'm drinking 20 cans a day. Got off of that. I'm totally fine. So some people handle it fine. But for some people, again, it's the same thing. You're making yourself want to eat. And that's going to negate any benefit from not having those 100 calories of sugar. In almost every study of sweeteners versus sugar, they come about the same, right? There's no difference. So therefore, taking the sugar is not, the calories are not going to be a problem, right? But it's the stimulation of your appetite that is going to be a problem. You start taking sweet stuff, even if it's artificially sweetened, all of a sudden you want to eat because you're priming your body to say, hey, food is coming, food is coming, there's this sweetness, I can feel it, food is coming. And then you're anticipating food. I mean, it's terrible to be stimulating, getting your body ready to eat and not feeding it, right? If you do that 3, 4, 5 times a day, pretty soon you break down and eat.
Okay. So another question is about actually when you're actually feasting. I've heard that some people say, since you're already time restricted, you can eat as much as you want to. Is that like really true? Let's say you do 1 meal a day.
Yeah.
Can you just do like 2,000 calories in that 1 meal, or is that going to be a problem? I mean, I assume it's
that's going to be, yeah, because remember, both are important, the number of calories you take and the hormones. So if you simply, the point of fasting is to allow your body to take those calories from body fat. So say you eat, 500 calories at breakfast, 500 at lunch, 1,000 at dinner. Now you skip breakfast, so you're down 500 calories, but you simply take 1,000 at lunch and 1,000 at dinner. Well, that's not really that effective, right? Because what you're trying to do is drop the 500 calories that you took from breakfast, take the 500 calories from your fat stores and burn that. That's how you lose body fat. You can try to do that. And the reason it's effective is that it's harder to cram all your meals into a single meal, right? It's harder, not impossible, but harder to take all those calories. So if you look at sort of studies of time restricted eating, when they restrict the time of eating, in general, the number of calories also goes down. And you can't separate one from the other. Like if you fast for a week, which is possible, can you eat sort of 14,000 calories in a single meal? It's almost impossible to do that. I mean, there's all kinds of satiety hormones that stop you from doing that. So when they say, okay, restrict the time, then you're going to do 2 things. One is, in general, lower the amount of calories that you take overall, and 2, give yourself the fasting period to burn fat. If you take away one of those big advantages, it's going to be a way less effective in terms of weight loss. And that's the mistake a lot of studies did. They thought there was just something magical about fasting. There's nothing magical, but it is a way to eat fewer calories without the deprivation. Remember that if you are used, remember the graph of ghrelin, those spikes of hunger at breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So it's clearly habit. If you get in the habit of not eating breakfast, for example, pretty soon that ghrelin doesn't go up at breakfast time. Like I haven't eaten breakfast for quite a while. I'm just not in the habit of it. So I don't. But it's not hard for me because I'm not hungry. I've just made it a habit. And the habit doesn't require willpower. So therefore, it's a lot better for you to do that. But the biggest mistake I actually think is to try and cram all your calories into that single meal. That's not the point. After you do the fast, you need to forget like you ever did the fast, right? You need to eat as normally as possible because remember, allow your body to burn the body fat.
Another question I have relates to kind of sleep and how it, the influence with the interaction with insulin. How does that kind of play? Because I've heard that sleep is so important as well.
Yeah, sleep is important. And the interesting part, and it can affect sleep in some people, but not in the way that most people think. It's usually people sometimes have so much energy because their body is getting flooded with all this energy that they can't sleep. They actually say they just can't sleep. They just have too much energy. So sometimes it gets affected, in which case you have to adjust that to do it. Most of the time, if you simply adjust your sleeping patterns, it will go away. But some people have found that problem. So it's usually it's not that they can't sleep, or it's not that their sleep is disrupted. It's just that they have a lot of energy, because that's what you're telling your body to do. Remember, during fasting, your body actually activates itself. It doesn't shut itself down. So you think about the hungry wolf. A wolf who is hungry is very dangerous, not because it's going to fall down and has no energy. It's zoned in and concentrated because of the hormones. Same thing with our body. When we fast, we actually are being activated, and sometimes that reflects itself in not being able to sleep.
Last question with regards to kind of the food industry. I'm just wondering if whether you've studied like the history of this, and whether some of our eating patterns is really because the food industry is pushing all the snacking every day, and it's kind of affecting the scientific community as well, that doesn't want us not to eat and buy food really.
I think there's a lot of truth to that. So there was a whole documentary series by the BBC a few years ago talking about, I think it was called The Men Who Made Us Fat. It's on YouTube probably. It's very interesting because they talked about how after World War II, the food industry was looking for ways to increase profits. And you can only increase your profits so much by, trying to beat out your competitors for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So what they did was they introduced a snack, because that's an extra period of time where you can actually sell people food. And it also is generally processed food because people don't want to cook a full meal. So it was by introducing that period of that extra snacking period, it was enormously important for corporate profits, and therefore they really promoted that. And unfortunately, what happens is that it gets taken a little far sometimes, because then they start sponsoring studies on stuff. So a lot of nutrition departments are funded by these big companies. And you see this, there's conflicts of interest everywhere. So you have food companies. So in the dietary guidelines for Americans, for example, you have, I think 90% of the people have conflicts of interest. It's actually a ridiculous situation. If you have, a study which is done by, say, Coca-Cola. So say it's, and it says sugar is good for you. Then you say, well, it's done by Coke. So obviously, I'm not going to believe it, right? So I don't know why we allow official guidelines to be created by people who have conflicts of interest. And it's the same for the WHO and all of that. Like, all the so-called experts are conflicted. Like, almost every single one of those people who writes guidelines, whether it's for diet, whether it's for management of heart disease, management of diabetes, almost every single one of those doctors has a conflict of interest. And they say, well, it's because we're getting the top doctors. It's like, I don't care if it's the top doctor. If they have a conflict of interest, then we cannot trust what they say, because we know, and again, there's lots of science studies on this, that if you're being paid by a certain company, you're going to find results that are favorable to that company. So is it really too much to ask that our guidelines be written 100% by people with zero conflicts of interest? Like, I don't think it's too much to ask. So, that way we avoid the sort of, what happens is that you have this doctor who's being paid by the food industry, who now thinks that processed foods and snacks and stuff are perfectly fine, and snacking is perfectly fine. But if he's taking millions of dollars from a snack food company, we simply can't trust his opinion. He's probably, or she is probably, a good person and thinks they're doing the right thing, but you don't know if that has been biased by the money that they receive. So I prefer not to. So yes, I think that there is a huge amount of bias, in this, but unfortunately, until people sort of change the, you know, change the process by which we produce these guidelines, it won't change. And that's maybe one of the reasons fasting, really until I started talking about it in 2014, was considered almost the worst thing you could do for your body is to not eat, even if you're like 500 pounds. It was so ridiculous because people were saying, oh, to lose weight, you need to eat constantly. And I'm like, how do you think that works? It's actually completely impossible to lose weight as you eat. You actually have to not eat to lose weight. That's just pure physiology and pure common sense. Like anybody can understand that. And yet, if you talk to doctors and dietitians and everybody, they think you must eat constantly to lose weight. It's like, oh, you must jump in the bathtub to get dry. Doesn't make any sense, right? But people kept repeating it, and then all of a sudden it became the truth.
Yeah, I think we really underestimate kind of how the industry really kind of subtly influences like papers and evidence, and sometimes you may not even see it so obvious, but there are background influences there as well in terms of who are writing the papers and looking at things like that. Another quick question about reversal of diabetes. People are interested to hear you say that. Can you just explain a little bit about how that relationship is?
Oh, absolutely. So type 2 diabetes is very simply the body has too much sugar. So if you have too much sugar, it's going to spill out into the blood. And as it spills out in the blood sugar goes high, you get diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. So if you simply take insulin, it simply takes that blood sugar and forces it back into the body. The minute you don't take that insulin, the sugar comes back out of the body into your blood. So you haven't done anything good. You've basically hidden the excess away, just like putting garbage under the sink. Still smells, but you can't see it. That's about it. If you do fasting, what you do is you allow your body to burn that sugar for glucose, the glucose for energy. If you burn off that glucose, you have less because your stores are going to get depleted. As you deplete them, you'll lose weight. As you lose weight, your type 2 diabetes essentially goes away. It's not very difficult to understand. In fact, lots of people have done this. And again, you have to understand that what we have here is millions and millions of people with type 2 diabetes, and which is leading to heart disease, cancers, and all these other bad diseases. And yet at the same time, it's a completely treatable, reversible condition, and the treatment is completely free and has been used for thousands of years. So the question is, why aren't we doing it? It's actually our duty to tell people that they can. And that's one of the things that we've been working on. So I work on it all the time, trying to get that message out there. In fact, again, until I started writing about it a few years ago, everybody said on the website, type 2 diabetes, chronic and progressive. Now they've actually changed their tune. In 2021, the American Diabetes Association has criteria for remission, which admits that remission is a possibility, which was not the case. They didn't say that until about last year, right? Because I just pointed out it's a completely ridiculous situation where people are saying it's chronic and progressive, yet every single doctor knew that it was reversible because some patients had lost weight and they reversed their type 2 diabetes. That's a huge public health issue. It's a massive one.
Great. I just want to I just saw a note in the chat about, whether we can drink water during fast. I just want to be really clear that we should be drinking water throughout. It doesn't matter whether you're fasting or feasting. So please don't stop drinking water. But, as Dr. Fung said, you can have coffee and tea as well, water, and if you want to put a little bit of other things is really kind of up to you, so just adjust accordingly. But one important question is really who should not do intermittent fasting? Is there kind of a group of people that should be really careful about this, like pregnant women or things like that?
Yeah, so pregnancy, breastfeeding, if you're underweight or malnourished, and if you're a child, of course. And again, it's all a matter, I say they shouldn't do extended fasting. So clearly everybody is supposed to be fasting, right? That's the word break fast. So 12 hours, 14 hours, everybody can do. But once you start getting into situations where nutrition is very important, pregnancy, breastfeeding, growing children, then you really don't want to be doing extended fasts, like multiple day fasts and, long fasts like that. And again, if you look at religion, it's the same. There are always religious fasts, but they always exclude certain people. So yeah, if you're underweight, you should be eating, right? That's just the way it is. And again, just remember that fasting is a tool, right? So it can hurt people if used incorrectly. So just make sure in the case that I mostly deal with, which is overweight, then you don't have to worry so much.
Yeah. Okay. And then for children, someone's asking that, I mean, obviously I think just the regular period is fine. There's no real need to do anything too special, I would say, for children. Yeah.
Exactly. So if you don't eat after dinner, if you do a 14-hour fast, and again, remember in the 70s, if you're a naughty boy, you went to bed without dinner. So you fasted from lunch until breakfast the next day, a 20-hour fast. Again, literally millions of children, fasted 20 hours at a time, hopefully learned their lesson, but nothing bad happened. So it can be done.
Yeah, it's like fasting is a dirty word, and it's really just when you sleep, you're not eating. So it's a great period of time to fast, right? Yeah. Okay, sounds great. Thank you so much. I know there are lots and lots of questions. I don't know if we have an opportunity to have you come on again, but if not, I know that everyone is dying to rewatch this in slow speed because you covered a lot of information. You speak really fast, but thank you so much, Dr. Fung. Yeah, we have people from all around the world really excited to hear about this. And so thank you so much for all the wisdom that you shared with us.
Okay, thank you, Esther. Bye.
All right, bye everyone, and we'll keep in touch for the next session and the next part of this next session in the series. Thank you. Bye.